The instructor told us on the first day that no cadet had ever finished the silence trial. He didn't say it as encouragement. Earth wasn't built for encouragement. He was a Velhari, one of the tall, gray-ridged species that communicated in subsonic pulses you felt in your back teeth before your ears registered anything at all. When he spoke in standard for our benefit, his voice came out flat and compressed, like something important had been stripped from it in translation. He stood at the front of the chamber, with his secondary arms folded behind his ridge plate, and let the statement sit in the air until everyone had absorbed it. The trial has a completion threshold, he said. 17 acoustic sensors, 11 pressure plates, a field 80 meters across. You will enter alone. You will cross it without triggering a single alert. If you trigger one, the session ends for you. The record, set 14 cycles ago, is a cross of 31 meters before detonation. No cadet in the history of this program has reached the far wall. Paused. The pause was deliberate. Velhari used silence the way other species used punctuation. You will not be the first. Was in that room because of a filing error. That's the honest version of how it happened. My transfer paperwork from Kalis Outpost had listed my acoustic sensitivity rating under a column header that meant something different in Vardeth's intake system, some bureaucratic mismapping between a frontier colony's shorthand and the Academy's classification codes. The result was that Darren Vask, 24 years old, 3 years on the Kalis perimeter, before a lateral transfer to officer training, had been slotted into the Advanced Silence Protocols course instead of the standard survey track. I knew this. I had flagged it twice. Both times, the administrative reply came back the same. The session was full, the roster was locked. I would remain enrolled until the next registration window. So I sat in the third row and watched Vardeth explain the field, and I thought about whether I had anything worth saying to him about the error, and decided I didn't. The chamber was purpose-built for the trial. The floor was a suspended platform, slightly raised, with visible cable housings running beneath its surface, the sensor network. The walls were lined with matte black dampening panels. Overhead lighting came from a strip of cool blue that ran the perimeter, no central fixture, nothing that would cast a competing shadow. The far wall, 80 meters out, had a single data terminal mounted at chest height with a slot for a completion card. Nobody looked at that terminal much. It was theoretical furniture. The cadets in my cohort were 3 Velhari, 2 Vardeth, the wide-shouldered green-gray species from the outer crescent, and 1 Phethian, who stood a full head, taller than anyone else, and moved with the careful deliberateness of something that knew it took up space. Plus me, 7 cadets total, running the trial one at a time over the course of the full session. The Vardeth went first. Name was something that required a tonal register I couldn't reproduce. So in my head I called her Caden. She was careful, methodical, moved well. She made it 40 meters. Further than the standing record. Before a pressure plate caught the edge of her heel on a pivot step. The detonation charge was a training round. A sharp crack and a bloom of white smoke. She walked out of the field with the smoke still rising, pulled her goggles up and sat down without expression. 40 meters, I watched Vardeth note it. He didn't look pleased. He looked, if anything, annoyed that the record had been broken without ceremony. The first Velhari cadet managed 52 meters before a vibration sensor caught him. He'd been moving too efficiently. Clean steps, precise weight transfers. But he'd miscalculated how much the plate network shared resonance. One sensor feeding into the next. He'd kept his body quiet and let the ground do the talking for him. I understood that. Resonance travel was the field's real trap, not the sensors themselves. The Phethian cadet made 20 meters and triggered 3 sensors in 4 seconds, not careless, just heavy. Physics, not failure. The second Velhari managed 68 meters, 68. Room shifted when he stopped. Even Vardeth recalibrated slightly. That compressed stillness he carried deepening by a degree. 68 meters was the best run I would see that session. And the cadet, who walked out, had the look of someone who'd left something real on the field. There were 2 cadets before me. Both failed in the 40s. By the time Vardeth called my name, the cumulative runs had given the room a particular texture. The mood of a cohort that has collectively confirmed what it expected to confirm. Trial was real. The record was real. The wall at 80 meters was, for all practical purposes, fictional. I took my completion card from the proctor's table and walked to the entry line. Kalis Outpost sat on the contested fringe of the Veth corridor, a strip of borderland that had changed administrative hands 4 times in the 30 years before I was born and existed during my childhood, in a state that wasn't quite war and wasn't quite peace. You learned certain things there that didn't appear in any curriculum. You learned that sound was information, that your own sound was exposure, and that the difference between a full night's sleep and a very bad night was often the creak of a boot on a specific section of graded flooring. My father's had a saying. He'd said it so often it stopped sounding like wisdom and started sounding like weather. Quiet isn't the absence of noise. Quiet is knowing where all the noise is. By the time I was 12, I could cross our outpost main corridor in full dark, past the motion sensors, past the pressure-sensitive grating, past the 3 Valhari-built detectors my father had retrofitted into the perimeter, without triggering a single alert, not because I was talented, because it was that or explained to him why I'd been out past curfew and he had no patience for excuses. At the field. 17 sensors, 11 plates. The cable housings under the floor told me where the plates clustered. Maintenance access required more housing density, which meant more plates per square meter in the near section and a gap in the midfield. The sensors were acoustic, which meant they were looking for sharp transients, heel strikes, joint pops, the brief pressure spike of a weight transfer made too quickly. The resonance risk was real but manageable. Resonance required amplitude and frequency both. If you moved slowly enough, you could use the platform's natural dampening to swallow your vibration before it propagated. I filed all of this in the part of my brain that had been filing it since I was old enough to be afraid of the dark. Then I stepped onto the field. I won't make it sound mystical. It wasn't. It was slow, careful work, the kind of work that looks boring until you understand what's being managed. Weight distributed between heel and midsole. Lateral movement to cross plate clusters diagonally rather than perpendicular, minimizing dwell time on any single pressure surface. Breathing through the nose, lower, keeping the chest from expanding too quickly in the acoustic field. Pausing at the midfield gap to let the platform settle before crossing the final, dense cluster near the far wall. 17 sensors, 11 plates, none of them fired. Slotted the completion card into the terminal at 80 meters. The screen confirmed it. Green light. Timestamp. The silence in the room behind me was different from the silence in the field. The field had been purposeful quiet, managed, earned. What I heard when I turned around was something else. It was the sound of a room that had run out of the script it expected to be following. Vardeth stood at the far edge of the observer platform, with his secondary arms still folded behind his ridge plate. He looked at the terminal. He looked at me. The compression in his voice, when he finally spoke, was more pronounced than usual. "That is not possible," he said. It wasn't a challenge. It was a genuine statement. The observation of a being confronting data that refused to fit the category he'd built for it. Valhari were honest that way. They didn't perform disbelief, they experienced it. "I grew up on Calis," I said. "We had a version of this." I nodded toward the field. Ours had consequences. He was quiet for a long time. That specific Valhari quiet that had weight in it. The session ended without further comment. Vardeth filed his report. I collected my card. And the cohort dispersed toward the barracks corridor. Nobody said anything to me directly. The second Vardeth cadet, the one who'd made 46 meters, held the door at the corridor junction in a way that might have been courtesy or might have been something else. I didn't ask. 3 weeks later, I received a revised course assignment. The silence protocols curriculum for the following intake had been updated. The trial now included a new benchmark category, Frontier Conditional, cadets whose pre-academy background included extended perimeter posting. The completion threshold remained the same. The passing metric had been adjusted. I didn't know if Vardeth had requested the change, or if the Academy's curriculum board had made it on their own, after reviewing the session record. It didn't matter. The wall was still 80 meters away. They'd just stopped pretending nobody could reach it.